I'm glad that you exempted the two old age pensions, the contributory and non-contributory, from your social welfare cuts. But you didn't exempt widows. Like, why would you distinguish between old age pensions and widows' pensions? Under what kind of social compass would suggest that widows can afford the cut and old age pensioners can't? Like, why would you do that? And why would you cut blind pensions and invalidity pensions and carers' pensions? And the only exemption, that was forced on you is the pension. That, you see, this is one of the things I don't understand. Why a government would be so socially blind as to include vulnerable persons where the total tax take is so small anyway. Like, you'd have got most of what you wanted from the main social welfare headings. And yet you hit invalidity pension, you hit blind pension, you hit carers pension, you hit widows pension, and that's what we mean at this side of the House when we say you don't really care about the most vulnerable, and our policy is to protect the vulnerable in our budget cuts at this side of the House. You have cut job seekers by €8. You have made no increase in the child dependent allowance in social welfare. It's the same as last year, and I think that's worth remarking. Child benefit is down by €10 per child for the first child and for the second child. Minister, what have you got against third children? In your speech you said that there'd be an extra €10 cut from the child benefit of the third child. Only. The fourth child won't be cut, the fifth child won't be cut, the 16th child won't be cut, the 20th child won't be cut. Just keep If you wait, like did some third child beat you up coming home from school when you were a young fella? What's this conspiracy against third children? And I have no vested interest. I have no vested interest. I'm a fourth child myself. Your changes in stamp duty, some of them are welcome. Certainly someone has to do something to try and get the property market going again. I think NAMA has destroyed the property market because they have taken everything out and put nothing back. And, before you leave office, you should call the NAMA people in, and you should tell them to put 2 billion or 3 billion worth of property on the market at fire sale prices. They might sell them too cheap, but at least they'd establish a floor in the property market, and people would start again. What's happening at the moment, everybody is watching prices continually falling. Nobody will get into the market because they're all saying, they'll fall another bit. We'll wait till they hit bottom. Somebody must put a floor on it, and the only people with big enough pool of assets are NAMA. Now, your 1% universal levy on all property and 2% over $1 million, that's an onerous enough charge. It means nothing at the moment because there's no market. But when the market picks up, it's going to be a heavy enough charge. And I would suggest to you, in the course of the finance bill, if you looked at a capital gains tax on the family home, it would be much less onerous. The problem about this is it's going to hit everybody in negative equity. It's going to hit people who have paid a lot of stamp duty over the last 10 years. Whereas if you did it through the capital gains code, you could exempt all those categories. And anyway, they wouldn't be making a profit. So I'm suggesting to you an alternative way of raising the tax in the stamp duty. Public service pensions, well, there's a lot of change. A lot of them were announced before. The levies have been announced in the plan. Public servants won't like them, but I spoke to a lot of them and they said that they really, in the end of the day, didn't object to be treated on an equal basis with existing public servants. So in the times that are in it, I'm not going to quarrel with that. You did nothing for people on negative equity. And I thought that was a very, very serious gap. Again, we had a proposal, and we won't charge you a penny if you implement it in the finance bill. If you take the people who bought at the top of the market between 2004 and 2008, and if you increase their tax relief to 30%, it would mean about €900 a year to them if they had a mortgage of 300,000. Now that's a targeted relief. Now you could pay for it by not having mortgage relief for anything that's sold from June 2011 on. Well, you got it costed in your department, and that's the way it works out. And of course, anyone who's buying from next June on, they're buying at the bottom of the market. They don't really need to be assisted through the tax code to buy property. So they're buying at knockdown prices. So, I mean, if you look at proposals like that and try to make some adjustments, you have a whole series of excise duties proposed, and we'll have a look at that in the course of the debate on the financial resolutions tonight. You have proposals on ministers and TDs' salaries, and you have a cap on public servants' salaries. I mean, I believe that if we don't start cutting in our own prospects and our own salaries, we don't have the moral authority to prescribe tough medicine for others. But it's not clear what you're doing with TDs. I mean, is somebody who's here for 30 years a new TD if they're re-elected in the middle of March next, or the first week in March? And if so, are they going to be hit by the 10% reduction on new public servants? Is that your intention? Because the phrase in your speech is ambiguous, and I think it should be spelt out. The public want to know what's happening with our own pay and conditions, and it has to be spelt out quite explicitly, and there needs no riddles whatsoever. I thought you might take the opportunity to introduce the changes which you announced in the 4-year plan on VAT. It's your intention, and you have negotiated the deal with the IMF, to take the 21% rate up to 22, I think in Budget 3, and up to 23 in Budget 4. Or maybe Budget 2 and Budget 3. I think a lot of, the retail sector won't like that, but a lot of what's charged at the higher rate of VAT is imported. Now, I think you should restructure again there, and you should try and do something for jobs by taking the lower rate, the 13.5% rate of VAT, down to 12 or lower if you can. But you could afford to go to 12. You see, the lower rate of VAT applies to all the domestic stuff, the service industry, the building industry, restaurants, the food trade and bars, hairdressing, newspaper industry. And they're the service industries, they're high employers. They're high employers, they're low margin usually. And a very small adjustment would get people back to work there. And I'm not making political points when I say that there are a series of supply-side measures that you could introduce to get more people back to work. And that's one of them. That's one of them, and it would work. Because if you bring down the costs there, you're going to get people back to work. You've tried it with the blunt instrument of abolishing the minimum or reducing the minimum wage by €1. This is an alternative way of doing it, where you get, you probably get good value out of it. And we've also proposed that the 8.5% PRSI employers rate should be abolished up to the level of the minimum wage. Very low cost measure again. But to save an employer €30 a week when they'll be taking on a new worker. And you know yourself, it's difficult to employ people, young people who are not that skilled, at the bottom end of the market. So you should look at, what the economists call supply-side initiatives. I know you haven't got millions to spend or billions to spend, but these kind of measures are focused, targeted measures to increase employment, to get more growth in the economy, and they have the great advantage of, costing very, very little indeed. You're silent on carbon tax. I thought the Greens had convinced you that you should move on carbon tax again, but you're moving on excise on fossil fuels. Now, you have to make up your mind on how you're going to tax fossil fuels. Are you going to continue on the excise route, or are you going to go for carbon taxes? Because, when you do it both ways, everybody gets hit twice. And it's not so long ago since there was a very serious increase in carbon taxes, and now we're back to excise increases again. My primary objection to what you're doing is there's no jobs and growth strategy whatsoever. An industry which is back on its feet again, thank God. The agricultural and food industry, you don't mention at all in your speech. And overall, the budget is a bit incoherent, and it's certainly soft on the rich and hard on the poor. The times ahead will be hard, Minister. We all know that. And the government has sought to tie the hands of its successors with a series of very specific commitments over the next 4 years. If Fine Gael is part of the incoming government, we will stick to the targets set down, but we will renegotiate the specific measures envisaged for the next 3 budgets. I have been assured by Commissioner Wren and by Mr. Chopra of the IMF that they will cooperate with us in doing so. I believe there is now...
Your problem.
I believe there's now a flaw in Ireland's approach to Europe, which arises from the hubris of the Celtic Tiger years. Since we joined the Union, the Department of Foreign Affairs has taken the lead role in our relationships with the Union and with the individual member states. It was quite common when Taoiseach Dr. Gareth Fitzgerald, whom I see in the Distinguished Visitors Gallery, when he was Minister for Foreign Affairs and Taoiseach. It was quite common for Ireland to make alliances with the smaller member states in particular to advance our interest. It was quite common for informal alliances with these smaller states to be entered to push Ireland's interests. There were close alliances with the Benelux countries in particular. Over the last decade, we seem to have lost our way and forgotten the friends who used to protect our interest. I suppose at a time when boastful Irish ministers could clear any bar from Berlin to Barcelona with their lectures on how to get rich through property speculation and how Ireland was the wealthiest country in Europe and a model for all to imitate, well, I suppose it was easy to forget our friends when that was going on. And when Irish ministers were the braggarts of Europe, it was easy for our friends to forget us. But we must now mend our hand. Our skilled diplomats must again be instructed to build alliances with member states who share our interest, and the central role of diplomacy to protect our interests in our relationships in Europe must be restored. In this regard, when a major new initiative, like the discussion on the issue of Eurobonds, was being discussed at yesterday's Council of Ministers meeting, I believe it was disgraceful that Ireland was not represented by a cabinet minister. I think that's neglect. I know you're busy doing the budget, but it was done at the weekend anyway. Like, why wasn't there somebody out there? It's the most far-reaching proposal, and it could solve an awful lot of our problems if the Eurobond is accepted. The President of the Union, Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Mr. Juncker, traditional diplomatic friends of the Irish, was the main proposer of it. And there was no Irish cabinet minister there to push the project along, which was so much in our vital interest. Despite Alaska and Corla.
Please. Deputy Noonan, without interruption.
Despite Alaska and Corla, everything that has happened, I do not believe our country is ruined beyond repair. If it weren't for the banks, our problems are manageable. And with the recently announced initiative to downsize the banks, we can come through this. The foundation stone of everything is certainty. That is why Fine Gael is committed to reducing the deficit to 3% by 2014 and to a total adjustment of 15 billion. We want to give that certainty to people out there, and we are committed. Once we have certainty, we can build confidence in this country. That is why Fine Gael is committed to an extensive jobs and growth programme. Once we have confidence, people will grow in hope and optimism and begin to spend money and invest again. That is why Fine Gael believes that the marginal rate of income tax must be kept low, that the 12.5% rate of corporation tax is essential and an absolutely essential component of our industrial policy, and that the 13.5% rate of VAT should be reduced to 12% when the standard rate is increased, as I proposed already. Fine Gael wants a pro-jobs tax policy so that the economy can grow and that jobs can be created. Fine Gael believe we can meet our budgetary targets for the next 2 years. And hopefully, after 2 years of meeting our budgetary targets, we will be back borrowing in the bond market at a far less penal rate than the 5.8% negotiated by the government in the bailout package. Fine Gael want the IMF out of here. We are an educated, talented, accomplished people, well capable of running our own affairs. At times of crisis, we tend to turn to the heroes of the past for inspiration, to Collins and Griffith, and to De Valera and to Lemass. I know that members on all sides of the House do that. Therefore, I will finish by reference to a quotation attributed to Michael Collins, which we could all ponder. Collins said, "Give us the future, We have had enough of the past. Give us back our country to live in, to grow in, to love.